Every time a new resident moves to the community, and over the last several years, we're averaging, I think, between 15 and 20,000 new residents.
Yes.
Each one of those folks has to come to this office. We are the welcoming committee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to transfer their driver license, they have to transfer their registrations.
Yes.
I mean, what else goes through that whole process?
Well, it's their title transfer. It's figuring out what they need to transfer. You think about a family. They come in and they move into the state of Florida, to St. Lucie County. They're like, okay, it's 2 driver's license and 2 title transfers.
And if they had teenage kids that drive,
right,
those have to get done too.
Yes. So it's a whole family, just the transfers, and they take one of the longest transactions, to be honest with you, because we're starting from scratch.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Kraft, your St. Lucie County tax collector, and this is another episode of Behind the Counter. And today we have Giovanna, our directors of operation. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of our offices and why the operation is the way it is. So welcome, Giovanna.
Thank you.
So right now we have 3 offices. The Fort Pierce office, which is where we're shooting this, was the original, and it was in the county seat. Then we opened up the Walton Road office, I think in the early 2000s. It was before my time, maybe in the 90s. Actually, before that, they were running out of the old Winn-Dixie down there in that shopping center, or Belk Lindsay. It was in that plaza somewhere. Then when they built the Walton Road, which is now the Dorothy Jo Conrad building, named after the tax collector 2 before me, they named it after her. When I was on the county commission, it was actually one of the last tasks I got to do as a county commissioner was commissioners named the building after her. So it was pretty sweet gig. Yeah. And then when I first got elected in 2012, I believe it was, I was at our first in-service day, not in-service, but strategic planning session. And I asked staff what they thought we needed. All the supervisors and managers were there, and they said, we need a new office. And we did the study, and it showed, where the growth was going out in the tradition way. So we started looking for a new piece of property, and we found a piece of property that was actually going through bankruptcy. And we were actually able to buy that property in tradition, 4.5 acres for like $600,000.
Oh, wow. Today,
I couldn't even imagine what that would cost out there. But at the time, Fort Pierce and Walton Road were about the same volume. Oddly enough, a lot of the Port St. Lucie traffic would come down this way. Then when we opened up Walton Road, it took a little bit of time to get the traffic to the tradition office until COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And then explain what happened during COVID.
Yeah, COVID, because we had a lot of our neighboring counties also, shut down. People were just desperate and trying to find, any location they can get into. And I think that's when they started realizing that the tradition office was open and was available.
And we went to appointments then they saw that it was open and available. What do you mean? This third option?
Yes. We had appointments all day when we first started, because of mitigating the traffic, making sure we didn't have too many people in the office at one time.
Well, that and too, if we didn't have an appointment, people weren't showing up.
Yes.
So when we opened the tradition office for the first year, I think we only had 10 frontline staff the whole time, and they weren't busy.
Right. We had the rest of the team here in Fort Pierce to help with the flow,
right,
because Fort Pierce and our Walton Road location, they didn't slow down.
No, there was no decrease in volume at all. It was bizarre.
Right.
So COVID gave us an opportunity to explore a little different way of doing business. At the time, we were it was walk in on demand. Wait your hour and a half, depending on the day. Some days you could walk right in, get right out. Mondays and Fridays, which we talked about in the last episode. You're going to be here for a little bit on a Monday and Friday because everybody wants to come in for whatever reason. Then the appointments allowed us to spread that out. And we also we've struggled to find a good queuing system. Talk about that process with us.
Yeah, their queuing system, we can't find one that is going to meet our demands. We have different service types. We have different times for each service type. So having that configuration or having a queue system that is willing to do that configuration for us is a struggle.
And costly rather. They charge us to do it.
Yes, they do.
And we've been through what, 4 different?
3.
Okay.
We've been through 3. We're on our 3rd one.
So it's actually a difference because there's an appointment system and then there's a queuing system.
Yes.
And we now have one that's integrated.
Yes.
And that makes life a little bit easier. Before we'd have to, even though they made an appointment, would come in, then we'd have to manually put them into the queue. Mm-hmm. So now we're with a new vendor. We're still struggling, but we're starting to get our arms around it.
Yes, we launched in February, so we've been a couple of months. Obviously, there's that learning curve. It's a whole different system, and just understanding. Whenever they do it, anyone does a demo, they don't get into the nitty gritty. You don't find those kinks out until you're live,
Right,
which is
right.
not a great way to understand or start learning how to understand the system. The little nicks and ticks that it does. But now that we're actually understanding, we want to make sure that if you have an appointment, that appointment is going to be called before we let any walk-in in. Even if we're allowing that walk-in, say, okay, we do have this cancellation, or we can serve you, before our walk-in time. We want to make sure that appointment is called first. That's the expectation that we give our customers, and that's
Right.
what we want to uphold.
And I'm always on the bleeding edge, which isn't necessarily the most comfortable thing for staff. And as a result, we're always trying new things in this office, in all three offices.
Yeah.
And we'll test it out in one office to see if it works and whatnot. Unfortunately, with the investment you have to make in a queuing system, you can't just do it in one place. You have to launch it in all three locations.
hmm
And if we were to go and visit another tax collector office, because we run things so much differently than anybody else, you can't really get a good gauge of how it would work in our setting.
Right.
And we get good feedback from staff. In we get one-on-one meetings with staff. They have an opportunity in their home team meetings to pass stuff up.
hmm
And that was a constant thing that we were getting from them, is the queuing
The queuing
system is
system.
awful. And
Right.
so we really struggled to get our arms around that piece, and I think we're starting to.
Yeah, we're starting to. Like I said, it's understanding. I think whenever we did our last queuing system, we were we were amazed with everything that it could do, forgetting that sometimes just being simple, what we need is,
Right.
getting the data, the minimal data that we need, and being realistic to what we do and what our mission and vision is we want, express transactions in and out. We don't want you to put you in the queue,
Right.
because you're going to go and sit down. And by the time you get back up, we would have served you already.
It's funny. I've been criticized because the hard pews, the church pews that we have, and I tell the public when they do, I'm like, I don't want you here long enough to be comfortable.
hmm
Like, I don't want you here long enough for your butt to get sore on that bench. Like, I want to get you in the door
hmm
and out the door absolutely as quickly as possible. So we'll take the easy transactions, which are not driver license, but registration renewals, property tax payments, what
Parking
else?
placards.
Parking placards, tag surrender.
hmm
We'll put them in the express line. It's a line. You literally stand there because
hmm
there's no greater feeling than being next. So when you're up there and you're next, you're paying attention
hmm
for when that window is open. You can step right up and it's right there in front of
hmm
the customer. They don't have to look for it. Everybody else, you expect a driver license to take a little bit of time. You expect a title to take a little bit of time.
hmm
So we'll let you sit down, take a load off for a couple minutes while we're waiting on the current customer. It's at the window. But we're also training the staff to turn over faster. So we're trying to get the staff to start calling for the next customer when they start the cashiering
Yes.
process. So
hmm
when they start to cash out, they're beginning to call the next customer, because the time in between customers can vary greatly.
Right.
People are on their phones. They get
Yeah, once you
mesmerized.
realize, okay, my number is called. Okay, let me look up at the screen. Now let me get up and let
Or
me
wait,
realize where
was
the
that my
station is.
number?
Right.
What was my number again?
So all of that takes a minute or two, which is time wasted. And then, them walking over, it's total between 1 to 3 minutes, depending on what's going on and what station they have to get to.
Yeah.
So that's time that's wasted that we can, just speed up the process.
And
if
how
we
many
call
how
them.
many times does a clerk literally walk from like station 20 down to the lobby area, go, number 571,
Yes.
and they're like, oh, that was me. And now we wasted 3-4 minutes, and that was potentially a third of the amount of time it would take to
hmm
process the entire transaction.
Yeah, we have that happen a lot, unfortunately, where we have to go out and get our customer.
So we develop a lot of software in house, and I went to my program manager. I said, hey, here's an idea. Augmented reality like Pokemon Go. I said, what if we created a queuing system when they're next, their camera turns on, it shows an arrow where their station is. He goes, Chris, stop it. Just stop it. But that's where my brain is.
Right.
We
Well,
wanna-
that and integrating our express line and not putting them in the queue the queuing systems that we've demoed, and you've demoed on some of them with me. They're like, what are you doing? Like, why
Yeah.
doesn't everyone go in the queue? They don't understand our process and the in and out, lot of them, until they're here in the office seeing what actually is going on, they don't realize the detriment that it would cause for our staff to in the time to put them into the queue for an express transaction.
Right. And to that being said, most of my colleagues put every customer into the queue. And for me, it's just it's lost time. And every time we have, for instance, a registration renewal, 2-3 minutes. So if we're wasting 2 or 3 minutes in between transactions, that's customers that could have been served.
Right.
Where if we get them on deck, they're right there, they're next. You're literally able to service 20 more customers in a day, that one clerk, because of cutting the time out in between transactions.
Right.
So it's really exciting stuff. So our population growth, we were averaging, I think things have slowed down a little bit on new residents, but we're still, it seems like we're issuing just as many driver licenses as we ever have, if not more. So every time a new resident moves to the community, and over the last several years, we're averaging, I think, between 15 and 20,000 new residents.
Yes.
Each one of those folks has to come to this office. We are the welcoming committee, right? Because they have to transfer their driver license, they have to transfer their registrations. I mean, what else goes through that whole process?
Well, it's their title transfer. It's figuring out what they need to transfer. You think about a family. They come in and they move into the state of Florida, to St. Lucie County. They're like, okay, it's 2 driver's license and 2 title transfers.
And if they had teenage kids that drive,
right,
those have to get done too.
Yes. So it's a whole family, just the transfers, and they take they're one of the longest transactions, to be honest with you, because we're starting from scratch. It's not like a driver's license replacement, where we already have your documents, we can just go. So that takes a little bit longer, but those are residents. That's what the tradition office is mainly. It's title transfers and registrations.
That's almost all new residents that are coming in there now. That area has grown so much. And when I grew up, hell, when I became a county commissioner 20 years ago, that was a cow pasture. Like literally, that entire area is cow pasture and orange grove. So canker and greening came through, and it wiped out all the orange groves, and then the landowners are looking for an opportunity, and they cashed out, and I don't blame them. That's they needed to do something. So now it's a beautiful area, and we get so many compliments on that office. We interviewed about 1,200 members of the public. When I say we, it was a form set up by our architect, and we had some folks standing in the lobby interviewing customers. What do you like about government buildings? What do you dislike about government buildings? And one of the biggest comments that we got was they don't like the way they're lit. They're dark. They're dingy.
Yes.
And one of the second things that they said was that the staff is rude in government offices. So with through design, we address 2 of those major issues. If you've been to the tradition office, it's glass pane. The clerks are looking out 100% of the day. They have an unobstructed view. They know whether it's raining, sunshine, or snow. They can see it all.
Unlike the Fort Pierce office.
The Fort Pierce office, which before I got here, you couldn't see outside at all. Now we at least get these 3 small windows that they could look out when we expanded the lobby. But it has become our busiest office, and I was criticized at the time for opening it. Like literally 8 years ago, I was in a campaign, and my opponent was saying, we don't need that office. And then even more recently, I've had an opponent say that we need to close that office and rent space. That makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. You're going to rent space for a permanent need. You're always going to need the DMV. You're always going to have a printed document, driver license, or at least on your phone, and it's electronic that can be verified, but a person has to verify those documents. And so we put that office, built that office now, how many years ago was it?
2019
that we opened up. We struggled a little bit with AT&T getting the data connection. That took us a little longer than it should have. But we finally got it. And now we're there, and I think the residents, when you start suggesting to them that you're going to close it and put it in a strip mall and share a parking lot, with all the traffic that we have and road test with all those folks, I don't think they'd like that very much.
No, I mean, having 70 to 80 people waiting after 2:30 customers, it's like I can't imagine not having that office. It's busy from one end to another of just residents, and now the Real ID compliant. They having till May 7th to be Real ID compliant to fly. That's caused more traffic into our offices as well.
Happy birthday to me.
Yeah.
Great. We'll get extra slammed on my birthday.
Extra slammed. Yeah. That is the deadline. And they're sticking to it so far.
Excellent. And now we also partnered with New Life Christian Center next door for road test at that location.
Christ Fellowship.
Or Christ Fellowship.
Yes.
So we allow them to use our parking lot on the weekends for overflow traffic, and we use their northern parking lot for road tests.
Yes.
It doesn't cost us anything, and why would we do that? Because frankly, if we can avoid putting our staff in a car for a road test with the public, we would like to do that
is
on public roads.
Yeah. So
we do there. It's safe, and doesn't mean that there's still accidents that happen. It's not on their property. It's usually when they get back and they drive over the curb. We'll have that. We've seen several accidents. Probably once a month. We see
it's crazy, and I think it's just they end the road test there in our parking lot, and because it gets so busy, I don't know what happens. I think they just get nervous, and that's what causes.
I remember here at the Fort Pierce location one time there was a dad trying to teach his daughter how to park in there. He's like, a little closer. And I guess she was trying to hit the brake and hit the accelerator, and she ran over dad, like literally broke his leg.
Oh my
God. Yeah, so we had to do an incident report for these knuckleheads in the parking lot. Like, oh no, but no, that's what
happens is nerves.
Yeah, it is absolutely, and we try to do our best to calm the tester's nerves as much as possible. Right. And then if we have a senior and they have to do a medical, that's a little bit different. We have to take them out into traffic.
Right. Yes.
Right.
And each office has its own route. Even though our traditional location, it's in traffic, but it's still always just a little bit safer because their public roads are also behind the hotel and all of that.
Right. But Fort Pierce and Walton Road, we do road tests now at all three locations.
All three locations. And that has helped tremendously. I mean, our appointment availability is now about maybe a day and a half, 2 days. Sometimes at Walton Road, we even have same day appointments available for road tests, when before we were about a month out. And
we got to a point to where we were actually, I think we had a couple Saturdays that we opened up to bring, the folks in. And you think about the driving tests, it's so many of it's young folks. They've been, waiting for a year. They got their permit. Now they want to come in and take that test. And, we were having to put them off, and they weren't thinking about making an appointment a month in advance.
Right.
Now my birthday's come and gone. I got to wait. So, we did our best to accommodate. Now I think we've really done a great job of keeping up with that. Anything else on the offices that we wanted to talk about specifically? They're about equal distance apart. We are working on a new plan that we'll announce here in a little bit of a really exciting, different kind of flex plan for the Tradition office to open some additional hours. We've been kicking this around for a number of years, and we just haven't had the staffing to do it. So if the Department of Revenue approves additional staff, then we're going to really be able to make that announcement, coming up here in another, probably October.
Yeah.
So
that's exciting. It'll provide more flexibility for our customers and for our staff. So if that all goes through, it'll be great for both.
We'll have another podcast on that to get into the nitty gritty on all of it. So Giovanna, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And to the public, thank you for joining in for another peek behind the counter. And until next time, I'm Chris Kraft, your St. Louis County Tax Collector.